Okay, so my name is Lena, and I'm the community coordinator of the German network of Widen the Circle, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to the third summer forum here at Vibrancy. It's actually my first summer forum, so I'm sure some of you actually have been more often here than me. I would say a big welcome to all the people from the German network. And then I would also really like to welcome all the people from the fellowship, which is our international bridge building part of Widen the Circle. Many of them actually came all the way from the US. Then also we have people from France here, from Greece, from Hungary and Israel. So all a big welcome to everyone. And then I'm also very happy that we have actually some Obermeier Award winners here. So I would ask you to quickly just stand up so we can give you all small applause. Thank you. All the Obermeier Award winners. So I see someone there. Christoph. Yes, here. And then also I would say welcome and also a big thanks to my colleagues from Widen the Circle, Joe, Rebecca, Brian, Craig and others. Thank you for all the help with the preparation of this event, I'm very happy to work with you. It's been fun the last 6 months. So then also a big thank you to Refugio, who has been our partner for 3 years and who's basically sharing their home with us. This is a very special place here. And after welcoming everyone and thanking everyone, I would just quickly go over the schedule. We're gonna have this keynote tonight, which will go till around 7 p.m. And after that, we're gonna have a barbecue in a lovely backyard. Many of you already have seen it. And that will go around 10 p.m. So we have the opportunity to get to know each other and talk about all the amazing work all of you are doing. Tomorrow we will start sadly quite early, at 9 o'clock. So I would ask you all to be here at 9 a.m. And we will have different talks from different participants of the fellowship and also our German network members. So that will be also very interesting and I'm very excited about it. And then in the afternoon we have something very special planned. We will do a photography workshop. Then the theme of this year of Widen the Circle was the theme of generation, or is the theme of generation. And tonight we want to have a look at the changing face of remembrance from an artistic, creative and aesthetic perspective. And I don't want to talk more about it. I will hand it over to Marc, who's not just a very lovely and funny and smart person, but also the vice president and the chief program officer of Facing History and Ourselves for many years. Thank you.
Glad she didn't name the number because it was too long. Welcome everybody. I'm not going to be standing most of the evening. We're just going to say a few words and we're going to see a short video and then we're going to start a conversation. We had a pre-conversation. I just have to warn you, there's a lot of energy up here. And so I am going to watch my watch so we don't go over. But I'm really excited to be in conversation with these three extraordinary people. So for the past few days, the fellowship program have been in conversations about questions that many of you in the audience have been grappling with as you do remembrance work throughout Germany, the United States, Europe. So here are just some of the questions we're going to put in the room right now. Who is the target audience of our work? How do we balance confronting the past while not paralyzing or traumatizing the audience? What impact does our identity have on how we do our work? How does the political climate impact our work? How can artistic expression enhance our work? And how does confronting the past differ with different generations? So we're going to open with a collage of voices from the panelists, and you have an assignment. Notice an image, a word, a phrase, not more than that, so we can talk for like 2 minutes before we begin the conversation.
Es gab in jedem Ort in Thüringen gab es Juden, nicht seit gestern, sondern seit 900 Jahren.
For me, it's very important in the context of Berlin and in Germany that Jewish culture has a face that's not a stereotype, and that has a face that's actually something that's challenging and not so easily consumed.
We're missing narrative a lot of times in the work that we're doing because we are running and we are stepping away from truthing and grounding us in truth.
To be Jewish here now, today, in a secular way, is also to challenge that and to say, look, a cultural identity is not one that has to be religious. So what we are trying to do at Lava is break open the possibilities of what it can mean to be and be seen as a Jewish artist in Berlin today. My name is Libeskind. I am the creative director of Lava Berlin. It's a fellowship where 8 artists are chosen to study ancient texts together, and out of that process, make an artwork. Part of the process that I think is really Jewish, and in the kind of legacy of Talmudic learning, is that we just interpret. The text itself is a very, very skeletal text. It doesn't give you that much. The job of the interpreter and the job that rabbis have been doing for many, many, many generations is to fill in the skeleton. What's wonderful is when you start looking at ancient text in an interpretive context, you end up having connections drawn from all across the board of things that you would never normally think about. So literary connections, artistic connections, musical connections, and that to me is the essentially Jewish part. How do we create narratives around Jewishness in Berlin that are not just about death, and that are not just about anti-Semitism, but that are about Jewish life, which is something which is much, much bigger and more beautiful and colorful and diverse than that. So I feel very optimistic about what we're doing.
There's a lot of fear around the conversation when we say white and whiteness and blackness and white supremacy. And what's the invert of that? There's fear around it. I had fear even preparing this conversation, saying, how am I going to enter into this conversation right now? Because we're not necessarily ready to grapple with it, but time is saying that we have to. Part of today, when we're looking at defining the new normal, equity and motion, it's about narrative, it's about joy, it's about justice, it's about white supremacy, it's about whiteness, it's about blackness, it's about all of these things that are fused into one space. And often that can exist in one groove. Groove is the cultural genius. It's the way that we measure time. It's a snapshot. We measure time through fusing melody and rhythm and syncopation with each other. Mobilizing equity through music and our policy, understanding history so we can make the change, Memphis. Then it goes into story is our art. Story is our music. Breaking culture down so we know how they do that. Story is the art we share. Story is for all to bear. Story is the human way to listen just to know you care.
Ich bin Christoph Mauny. Ich arbeite für die Weimarer Mal- und Zeichenschule als Bildungsreferent.
Es gab in jedem Ort in Thüringen gab es Juden, nicht seit gestern, sondern seit 900 Jahren. Das waren die ehemaligen Nachbarn, da man sie schon nicht wiederbeleben kann, aber zumindest sollte man ihre Geschichte kennen.
Als ich noch ein Kind war, gab es in Gotha einen Platz. Da war gar nichts.
Wie ehrfurchtsvoll ist dieser Ort.
Auch einen Zaun gab es nicht. Kinder spielten dort. Das war das Einzige, was dort überhaupt
Es ist
passiert.
nichts anderes denn ein Gotteshaus.
Leute nannten diesen Platz.
Es gibt natürlich viele Wörter, die ihren Ursprung im Hebräischen haben oder die im Jiddischen Ursprung haben, die teilweise dann auch ausgesprochen werden. Das ist insofern der Beweis, wie integriert die Juden waren in der deutschen Gesellschaft. Das, was die Nazis nicht zugelassen haben, nämlich die Leistung der Juden in Religion, in Wissenschaft, in Wirtschaft, das müssen wir wieder vermitteln, weil es gehört ja zur Geschichte der Leute in Gotha.
Noch eine ganz kurze Unterbrechung, wenn jemand Übersetzung braucht, weil es wird in Englisch stattfinden. Wir haben Übersetzung, also gar kein Problem. Falls jemand noch Übersetzung braucht, ganz kurz. Okay, danke.
So, just words, images, just shout them out. Just literally shout them out. This is not a formal room. We should probably be even closer. Inspire. Emotions. Powerful. Collection. Complexion. Connections. Stories. Rhythm. Healing broken connections. Inclusion.
New normality.
Appearing and disappearing.
No stereotypes. Processes. Okay. So we're going to begin. Thank you. So, all of you have bios of the three panelists. So I'm not going to go over and do a whole introduction. You can read the bios, but what I've asked each of them to do is talk about what's missing from the bio, about your identity or the work that you do that might be important to share before we begin our conversation. So, Rachel, you're on.
Wow. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. My name is Rachel. I am a visual artist and a performer and a cultural facilitator. I grew up in Berlin. I'm not German, and I lived here because my father won the competition to build the Jewish Museum, which is a very important part of the memory culture, especially post-unification in this country. So I grew up in a household. My mother and father worked together. We were not a part of the community. This memorial culture, this memorial project, historical project, was the bread and butter of my family and of my life. And so I then moved to New York City as a teenager and did high school and university and lived there for many years and completely experienced a very different part of my identity as an American Jew suddenly. And I have this kind of dual experience, I would say, that really informs my life and who I am. And I've come back to Berlin, and my work as an artist does not only have to do with Jewish topics, it does have to do with history, it has to do with images. What truth we can share in an image, what truths are repressed in photographs, what's in archives, what's left out of archives, how archives are made, etc., and so on. You can go on the website, I'm not going to bore you with all that. I will say that since returning to Berlin, I found myself in a kind of unexpected leadership position and being the creative director of an organization for Jewish artists, founding a Jewish Writers Collective, the Jewish Museum, a number of other projects that I'm doing to try to understand and connect and compose contemporary Jewish culture here of working Jewish artists. And the running question for me that I'll finish off with is there such a thing as Jewish art? Is there such a thing as Jewish writing? Is there such a thing as Jewish thought? Are these actually boxes I put myself in? Are they relevant? They're relevant to my history, but I don't know, I still struggle, especially with all the different people I meet with radically different biographies than I am as Jews. What does it mean to work together and to make Jewish culture now, here? And still I'm on the journey to answer that.
Thanks, Richard. Christoph.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I'm Christoph from Weimar in Thuringia in the east of Germany. I grew up in a small town with 700 inhabitants, so it's a big thing for me. Being in the capital of this country, speaking a foreign language where I don't feel very comfortable. And what I'm doing is working for this art school. Before that I was working in a museum, and I did the same thing, working in between things, between arts and history, or the school book of history maybe, and I try to bring people together who know something and are able to do something, because me, I'm not an artist or anything. I wish I would do the stuff that you do, but I love bringing people together, and I believe in another education and another form of education. That means learning with not only the head but also the hands and the heart. So I believe in aesthetical forms that can help connect with all the facts. Yes.
Thank you. Justin. Good evening, afternoon, everyone. Justin Merrick, live in Memphis, Tennessee, originally from the Maryland, D.C. area. And this feels like almost a full circle moment right now as well, and very glad to be here in company with you all as well. I'm gonna piggyback off of your part around identity of like duality. And some of us, we were talking about this earlier today, but this concept that W.E.B. Du Bois put into motion back, I think it was 1914, with double consciousness, and this idea of being black and in America, this concept of dominant culture, right, and alternative narratives. It could be being a woman, right, within a male-dominated society, right, that you live in this space in an authentic way because you're constantly a woman and constantly in a space dominated by dominant culture, constantly black, constantly in a space, constantly Jewish, right, constantly in a space dominated by dominant culture. And lots of intersectionality in between. And so I found myself as one that runs an organization and an artist, right? Being in two different spaces. And what brings that bridge together for me is music. And I see music as being a connection between music making and like movement making. They're interchangeable. In the history of Memphis, 1960s, Memphis was known to be the soundtrack of the civil rights movement. And what it meant, right, the evolution of African American music, that there was always double meaning within the music. So I have a little drill to kind of break the ice, if you will. Just everybody tap with me. Don't rush it. Unify. So rhythm. It's really, really important. It's the cadence of every movement. Slow down a little. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water, wade in the water. Close your eyes. Wade be an Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. There's something, many of you still had your eyes closed, and I went like this, and you still stopped. Because we were in connection with each other. So a big piece of the work that I do is helping to connect music making again to movement making. We'll talk, I guess, a little bit more about that. Very glad.
So you can see we have quite an extraordinary panel here. So Rachel, in the opening video, you say, for me, it's very important in the context of Germany and Berlin that Jewish culture has a face that is not a stereotype, has a face that is actually challenging and not so easily consumed. You also spoke about how the need to create narratives in Berlin that aren't just about death and anti-Semitism. Can you talk about what you mean?
Yes. You know, history is unreliable. The future is always projected as this unreliable, scary thing, but actually the past more and more feels like that. And the effort to coalesce a narrative in Germany had a very strong push after the war, obviously. And that push we can feel in many ways is dissolving and becoming amorphous and trying people, their efforts to reform it. And I think it is important to think about historical narratives that are not so easily consumed, that doesn't just, it's not a page in a textbook and you say, yes, and 6 billion Jews died, and thank you very much, and now we're done, and we're going to move on to the next. Right? There are so many more ways in which Jewish culture, in Germany specifically, is a part of German culture. I just recently learned from a Yiddish expert, for example, that there's a new linguistic theory that German comes from Yiddish. Not that Yiddish comes from German, which was the going theory, that actually the German language itself comes from a Jewish dialect. So just the notion, it's very hard, I think, to grasp. And I think that is in many ways actually an echo with African American culture and American history in America, the ways in which these cultures are intertwined, and the incredible void, the rupture that the Holocaust left, and continues to play out in this culture. So it's just not easy, and I think as we move away in time from the Holocaust and from the war, there is an effort to make it a kind of easy thing. Okay, we know how to make memorials. Okay, great. We have memorials in the city, and now we have the stumbling stones, and we have mandates in school about how to teach it. It's all kind of running its course as it should, and I think it's problematic. I think we need to all the time look back and think about ways in which we actually can teach history, and that's not just purely didactic. That's done through different forms, through music, through performance, through film. I mean, there are just many ways to do it. It doesn't, so this is something I spent a lot of time thinking about. And what was the second part of your question?
We need to create narratives in Berlin that just aren't about death and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of joy that I experience as a Jewish person with a big Holocaust legacy. I have I have kids. I live a joyous life, and my father always says, I say it every day to myself, living well is the best revenge, and it's true. And so it can feel very burdensome in the work that I do, that does have to do with Jewish history here. It's dark. It's heavy. It's depressing. And at the same time, you have to hold space for that and cultivate space for your own joy and for meaning. And what does it mean to be alive today and to have joy, and to say, I see that history, and I teach that history, or that history is a part of my practice, and at the same moment, I'm going to show you what it's like to be a meaningful, happy person in the world that finds meaning every single day in a street where you know X, Y, and Z, you know, these tragedies happen there, the dead bodies, or whatever, continue on and on. It's endless in this place, actually. In a place like Berlin, it is endless. Every corner you go to, every building has an address, has a historical moment. Every neighborhood has its own history. There's so much, and yet we still have to continue to live our lives. And so cultivating that duality in your life, I think, is really, really essential.
Thanks. So Christoph, you know, we saw these extraordinary images of students in the video. Can you talk about why you chose to do your remembrance work with students, and also describe the process of engaging them with the content, past and present? Maybe even tell a story about one of your students if you want.
Wow. Maybe I can say it like this. It's very human nature that we are more interested in something when it affects us, when it has something to do with you, with your life. And for example, doing the topic Jewish life, history, culture, whatever in Thuringia with teenagers, you have to see that it seems that it has nothing to do with their lives. In these ages, you all remember that you have to do with your body and with love, which is not answered, and you have a lot of things to do, and then an institution, a museum, or a teacher is coming up with this topic, which is seemingly foreign and has nothing to do with you. So you have to work in a participatory way from the beginning. I think you can't produce anything. You can have millions of bucks financing a Hollywood movie, but it won't connect with these people. So the idea is to start from the beginning with people, to assure the interests of the target groups right from the beginning. There are a couple of effects. You have this learning effect, of course, because the participants are really dealing with stuff, with the content, dealing with texts and images, and they have to, as a peer guide, they have to kind of translate something or visualize something more easier. And then you have the social effect. They come together, they see they are not alone, and they're strong together and can create something. And the most important thing is that you can assure the target audience here. I mean, publicity, motivation, empathy, and stuff. So it makes completely sense for me to work with them. And in this project, it all started with. If I'm too long, please interrupt me. But this project, what you just seen with this little cutted movie, started with this vocabulary project. We started to invite all the schools in this town, 46,000 people, so it's very small, and in the district. Please send us 10 words, origin from Hebrew or Yiddish, which are in our language, in our everyday language, still present, like zocken, gamble, or break a neck, halt im Beinbruch, or kaff, which is a beautiful word describing a lot of towns in Germany and villages. The teenagers are talking with this Jewish content, if you want, but they don't know. But when you confront them, they immediately see something. Oh, maybe it's not that far away from me, and I'm talking already too much, but then we are showing old postcards of this town from the Weimar Republic time, and you see several multi-picture postcards with the main signs of the town. So in the 20s and 30s, this town was very proud of this wonderful, beautiful, solitary building, the synagogue, which was on the cards with the main sign of the city, which is a Baroque castle and the park and another thing. And immediately it was away after 34 years. So, in this way, they can see that Jewish life is a part of their city, of the country, of their language, and also with these words who are spelled out every day, and you have heard them pronounced by the head and chief of the Jewish community in Thuringia, Reinhard Schramm, that the Nazis finally didn't succeed, still alive.
Thanks. And we'll go back to that example so you can really give even more texture about what happened and what did you do and how did it sort of evolve. So Justin, in the little piece of video we saw, you spoke about how we're missing the narrative a lot of time in our work we are doing because we are running and are stepping away from truthing and grounding yourself in truth. Can you give some context about the challenges of truth-telling, where you work in Tennessee and in other parts of the United States that are silencing truth-telling? But also in this, I'm giving you a long assignment, explain what you mean when you talk about groove, the way we measure time, fusing melody and rhythm and syncopation with each other, and the role music plays in your work of confronting the past and building community. And the reason I'm putting that all together, I think you know why, because to get in the groove and to do the confrontation and also music, there's a process that happens that I would love you to talk about.
Okay, yeah. Let me start it from I would say the groove and maybe rewind a little bit before that. So music is timeless, right? And it's lots of layers on it. One of the things that I love about German language, right, are all of the words that you all create, right, out of smaller compound words. I don't necessarily have the ability, but I wanted to at least draw this one connection. Repeat after me, wartet im Wasser. Make sure I'm saying it right. Wartet im Wasser. Did I say it right? Wade in the water. So as I was asking everybody, what's wave? What's wave? Like a lot of folks were like, I don't know. So it's very much an African-American, right, derives from an African-American spiritual. What I would want to impress right before we even get to groove is that the language of freedom in context to music lives within the spiritual. It is the only form of music that was born out of the concept of freedom. It's really a powerful notion. Every spiritual that you hear is actually a song about freedom and liberation. So this goes back to the double, right, consciousness, because the words that you hear in terms of wade in the water, it's literally to wade in the water. But that was about making sure that when slaves were going up north to escape for freedom, that they went in the water to lose the scent of the hounds. Right, there's always, so this goes all the way up to 1960s music, where then like groove really becomes a part of it. Same concepts, right, in terms of what you hear, right, as the dominant culture lens and understanding, and then the undercurrents of what it actually meant to those that were practicing, which is the same as movement building, right? When freedom is being denied, right, you can't talk about it in open spaces, so you have to create alternative ways to be able to talk about it. So the other piece I would want you to get from that, when we were all in rhythm with each other, right, that resonates well beyond, right, you'll still hear the pound. But rhythm becomes like how we measure in time. And so When we record, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? No matter when you hear it, like it's recorded the same thing, and so it becomes timeless. Music is timeless. And in that snapshot lives memories, right? When we hear music, so it's the part of memory keeping, that's the part of healing, right? That can happen. How that connects to groove. So groove is multiple rhythms that are happening at one time. That's what makes it funky. James Brown, say it loud. I'm like all these, right? All these sounds that are happening, those are all different rhythms that are layered on top of each other. That's groove. The reason why that's, in my opinion, like a cultural genius, right, is because there's multiple stories that are happening within a snapshot of time. And we can then choose to dance, right, as a way of expressing those rhythms. Those rhythms can be applied to language and lyrics, which then have another definition. And so it becomes this incredible way of storytelling. And for Blacks, right, it was an escape. So music is also a connection to the divine. It's spiritual experience. That's why I believe we can close our eyes and you can stop and everybody stops. Because there's a spiritual connection that happens with everyone. So why that's important in concept then to truth-telling is what you said. So music has a way, it's a measurement of time. It has a way of suspending time. Even though rhythm keeps going, we pause in those moments. And we hang on to the lyrics, we hang on to the music, and we stop. And when we are listening to music, which is why therapy, for those who have anxiety, right? It's why it's so therapeutic. It's why many of us turn to music as an escape. Because in that suspension of time, we are able to suspend our own beliefs. We're able to challenge that. We're able to have an inner dialogue and narrative. All of that's happening within that snapshot. And so truth-telling then, right? I believe that we never get to truth-telling because we don't slow down enough from the hustle and bustle of life to deeply reflect, to allow it to marinate, right? And understand and make meaning out of it. So there's two things, right, in terms of like music that I think is really important. When we talk about two meanings in the song, Wade in the Water, there's the sense-making part of that, and then the meaning-making part of that. Sense-making, stay with me, is the broader narrative. It's external. It's paternalism. It's fatalism. It's, right, it's the external way that we explain and make sense out of what's being said. Meaning-making is like, when I was on this trip and we went to the museums, I had to make sense, right, within a German context, like what was happening within the Jewish, I had to make sense of what was happening, the year, the time, like place it, right? But meaning making is like, what does that mean to me as a Black man coming from America? To make meaning, to be transformed, right, by what's happening, you have to slow down to process. And society does not give us the opportunity to really do the sense making. Right, we get dates, times, like all of what that means, but then we don't slow down enough then to make meaning as to why that's relevant. And so I believe that for us to do that, because it's layered and it's really heavy, and because music is the measurement of time, is how I see it, we can suspend time, right? Because we can capture all of these things and go back and listen to it over and over and make sense of it and make meaning. Music then becomes the conduit to be able to do truth-telling, because it allows for an analysis to happen that's not so heavy. It's important. The reason why it was an escape and a reprieve for so many Black folks was because it was light and it moved, even though it was heavy stuff coming at you. But the freedom of being in the song and in the music meant that you could experience, even for a brief moment, what liberation might mean, just from putting some earbuds in. And that is the key to truth-telling, is being able to slow down and to do the meaning-making and the sense-making that's layered, and not be overwhelmed or overburdened or burnt out as a cause of all of these coming at you. to then amplify what your beliefs are into the world.
Thanks. So, hold all these thoughts, and these are some, it might be hard to follow some. We're now going to try to move and get very concrete, and sort of ask each of them, and I'll go, I'll cue you, about some project that you worked on where the concepts that you talked about play out in this, really describing the context. And as you describe it, I'd love you to do another thing, is what you just talked about, the slowing down process. I don't know if you think about that in your work too. I imagine you do, or it's somewhere. Weave that in too, if you could. But we had talked about the courtyard, where there was an insurance company, and its connection to the Nazi past. So we're gonna just show 2 slides, and then you're gonna sort of take it from there.
Okay, well, I guess I'll contextualize it a little bit.
Yeah.
So, part of my artistic practice is to, with a collaborator of mine who's a Yemenite Israeli gentleman here, and we do performance walks, which are about 2 hours long. We're trying to get produced by a theater in a neighborhood, and then we focus on that neighborhood. And we do a walk. We do usually about 10 stops on the walk. And it's somewhere between didactic historical practice, completely Dadaistic, absurd performance practice, a conversation challenging people about their bodies in space as an audience member. So the walks are very strange. Marc actually was just on one we did yesterday in Mitte. It's a strange form. I still haven't wrapped my head around it because it's very impactful. I see from the people who participate in these walks, it's doing something. For me, it's still just such a kind of ridiculous, I have I'm a teacher, I'm a clown, I'm a historian, I'm an artist, I'm doing stuff with my hands, I'm also, talking about really tragic topics. It's a strange place for me to embody, and I actually haven't fully processed, I think, what that is, but it's doing something. I don't know yet what. In one of the walks we did, the series is called, I should say, the whole series, this collaboration, this whole walk thing is called The Dialectics of Departure. And it came out of Passover, which is the Jewish holiday of spring, which deals with the Exodus from Egypt and liberation. And we really I think a lot about, what does it mean to be in departure? You know you're leaving something bad behind, and your status is changing, but you have no idea where you're going. And it's in the Bible, it's in the story, right? The Israelites, they are kind of blindly following Moses, but they have no idea where they're going. And they could be worse, but they're just going. And what does it mean to be in that? It's actually very similar to what you're saying about being in society. What does it mean to just be like, I just gotta keep going. I don't know where I'm going, but I have faith it's gonna bring me somewhere. And what is it to be in that limbo when you're between where you left and where you're going? So the series is called Dialectics of Departure. And we researched for months and months and months a neighborhood, and there's often way too many sites to visit. We can't take people on a 10-hour tour, although one day maybe we will. We have to keep it, reasonable. So we discovered, I grew up here. I knew in my childhood just about anybody who was doing a memorial project. And we discovered this project from 1994 that I had never heard of, and nobody I knew had ever seen it. And it's this project right here, which was done by Eyal Weizmann, who now is very famously a part of forensic architecture, Zvi Hecker, who's a famous German Jewish architect, and Misha Ullmann, who's a sculptor. And they did this beautiful sculptural intervention on what was once the Lindenstrasse Synagogue, the synagogue of Lindenstrasse, which was at the time a huge synagogue. I think one of the biggest congregations in Berlin. It was finished in the 1890s, and it was a beautiful building. There are actually incredible photographs of it, if you're interested. And the synagogue was destroyed in Kristallnacht. It was bombed in the Allied bombings, it sort of the site lay empty, and it was, since the 1920s, neighbors to the building you see in the picture, which is the BAMA, very, very famous major insurance company in Germany, BAMA. And BAMA owned the site next to it, and it's right where the wall is also. It's in a very tenuous site geographically in Berlin, given the last 80 years of history here. And so it's a memorial that reconstructs the pews that were in the synagogue. That's all the memorial is. It's just the pews that were in that synagogue on that site. And it's literally in a courtyard of an insurance company. There's no signage, which is, I guess, why people don't know about it. I encourage everyone here to go. It's across from Axel Springer, Lindenstrasse in Hamburg. You can find it online if you Google it. But we do a ritual there. We plant something. We say prayers. We play a recording by the incredible singer who was the, not the rabbi, but the cantor, thank you very much. The cantor, who was a famous German Jewish cantor at the time, and we play him singing in that site. And where you see the red brick wall, I mean, that would have been the bima. So we kind of try to recreate what were the proportions of this place, because we have this beautiful intervention that shows us the pews. And now let's plant a plant, which is a very emotional thing in a site like that, and play the music of the singer, of the cantor, who was in that synagogue, and sort of stand where we imagine the ark was, right? The ark and the bima. Anyways, it's a strange thing when memorials are unnoticed and nobody knows them. And I actually love that this is a secret gem. I feel complicated about it. I wish more people would go there. It's a very holy spiritual place, in my opinion. It's also weird because you've got people from the insurance company on break smoking cigarettes in the courtyard. And I think all the time, whenever I'm there, I'm like, do they know what they're looking at? You know, are they thinking about it all day when they look down at these concrete pews? I went down a rabbit hole to try to find out more about BAMA's Nazi history, which is, like most German companies, stops in 1939 and resumes again in 1945. There's very little to be found. If any of you guys are historians or know historians who are interested in looking that up, I think there's a lot there. They gave this site, that I do know, they gave this site for free. They paid partially for the memorial. But I don't know, there's a complicity, there's a silence in BAMA. There's something about it that's very unsettling. And we bring people on this stop because it's, to me, a really succinct example and metaphor of German memorial culture when it comes to actual corporations. Because there is a lot of unresolved, I think, in this country when it comes to corporate responsibility. Corporations which made a lot of money in World War II and were never really held accountable. And so this is like, they always say yes to us. We always have to tell them. Our walks are usually on the weekend, and we have to say, hey, can you please leave the door to your courtyard open so we can walk in? And they would say, yes, sure, no problem, of course. It's a Jewish thing, don't say too much about us. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just joking. But it is, I don't know, it's a tenuous thing, and we walk, I do feel like we tread carefully to be respectful of this site, and I'm very grateful that it exists, and I have a lot of questions still. I hope I answered all your questions.
We were talking in the group, the fellows group, about signage. Is it, how much signage do you have? How much do you help lead someone through something, a process?
Right.
How much do you leave it bearing?
Right.
And it's complicated, right?
Yeah, and I will say signage is also demystifying. And sometimes it is beautiful to just encounter something. Like this is a beautiful place. I like that there's not more signage. I like that it's very bare. I don't think it serves a pedagogic. It's not doing that much for something. If you really want to teach something, but it's very poetic, and I think poetry has its place in memorial culture and deserves its place.
So Christoph and I we first had a conversation, and I saw your work. I literally was in tears. The beginning of the video, there's some images. Maybe we can show two of the images. So in one of your interviews, you described the impetus of doing this work, and you said, it was clear we had to do something here. It simply called out for an intervention. Can you describe what was unique about the site, about the community where it was shown, the evolution of the project, and the variety of reactions from the community? A lot in there, and we can go back and forth, but...
Please, you have to stop me maybe. Okay, I try it. Welcome to this little town with 46,000 inhabitants in the west of Thuringia, Eastern Germany. And, well, I worked there since, I think, almost 7 years. And then this topic in Thuringia and also in Germany came up, 1700 years Jewish life in Germany, 900 years Jewish life in Thuringia. And well, in this museum, which is very known for its ducal collection coming from the 17th century, and there's this big connection that makes everyone proud to the House of Windsor. So Queen Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha was the grandmother of Queen Elizabeth II. So well, this is the narrative of tourism marketing and education and stuff. And well, but there's also the biggest regional collection in the museum in Thuringia there, and there's also the responsibility of town collection. So it has we have to do something about this topic, and of course the first idea in the museum is let's make an exhibition in the sacred rooms of the museum. And but when you go to the traces of the Jewish history, you know, after a little research on Wikipedia, for example, that there was this synagogue. Where was it? Is there anything that remembers? And yes, there was a sign, a memorial plaque, created in 1988, almost the end of the GDR. 50 years, half a century after 1938, the November pogrom. So, okay, there was this plaque, and I tried to look for it, to find it. It was not that easy, and after a couple of months, to just inform, has some information on this plaque, but after a couple of months, I saw this picture in a newspaper. Showing in the January snow a construction worker with a jackhammer and doing the destruction of this memorial piece. Why? Because of this great architectonical masterpiece of the shopping center with a drugstore and a jean store, and yeah, you can buy everything that you probably don't need. So, and also need. Well, and in this construction, there are two building parts with a passageway. It's a really strange passageway, by the way. And there's still reinvented a memorial site showing this 1988 plaque in a new construction with a big Star of David, or David, I don't know how to pronounce it in English. Well, and with other stuff like big letters on some of the walls of this shopping center. It's somewhere there's written Gotha remembers, and on another wall there's Gotha shops, Gotha Kaufland. So it's so hard. Yeah, you can't believe that's really what we do here, and it's hard to find words. So it was clear that we have to do something big, loud, and beautiful. And the idea was doing a 60, 360 degree video sound installation. And the pictures that you've seen before, maybe you have seen that there were two lines or two parts of the screen, and that was actually the separation of the 360 degrees. So it was not a frontal movie, but a round movie. It was really expanded cinema. And you can watch it 6 times and see new pictures or mention a new sound effect. And yes, and we did that for 1 week. In the evening hours, it had to be dark, of course, and we had 10 projectors on the roofs, and it was quite massive attack with technique and everything and computer stuff. And well, but the way to this performance, which was really exciting and also being disturbed, and we can talk about it later, was that we tried to find participants, teenagers, with the idea, hey, do you want to make a little movie workshop with the topic Jewish life, Jewish history and stuff? Oh wow, for a teenager, of course, it's interesting to get behind the scenes and go into a little movie center, thank you, movie studio, film studio, and see how it works. Like, how do you create a fire in the eyes? You're sitting in front of a television with flames, looking into it, and the camera is filming you, for example. So it was interesting for them, and also they get in touch with the history. So,
what could you just briefly talk about what happened? What was the community's reaction? Because this is a community that is fairly conservative, right?
Yes, there is this misunderstanding in Germany, above all in Eastern Germany, I would say, that you have to be politically neutral. It's a big success from the right-wing narratives in the last decade, I would say. So a teacher or a school director or a member of an education or institution or museum thinks that he has to shut down if something happens because he could be political, putting teenagers or students in some direction. But it's a misunderstanding of political or party neutralism and losing democracy values and human rights. So that's the biggest problem, I would say. But also there were anti-Semitic reactions and distractions, like someone carved a swastika into this Star of David. In a neighborhood garden, they tried to overpower our music, our sound installation. We could hear it in the pauses of this 8-minute video, which was shown in loops, and they tried to be louder than us. And there were 2 Hitler salutes, and above all, one from already reported extreme Nazi who did this Nazi salute in front of the police car. Fortunately, he was so drunken that he wasn't a danger for us, but he frightened above all one of the participants, Victoria, greetings. Victoria is a person of color, which is really rare in Utah and Thuringia, and yeah, she became frightened, this 18-year-old woman, after she was showing her face in, I don't know, 5 meters high in this performance, and she was so frightened that she shouted to him, "Nazi Schwein," Nazi pig. And what happened was also that not only the Nazi get into the police car, but also she got insulted. She got problems because of insulting him, and she had to spoke for in the police station a couple of months later. So it's crazy. It's like a reversal of victim and prejudice. Yeah, it was so crazy, and also in the newspapers today. There's just one newspaper left in Thuringia. Seems to be 3 newspapers, but it's same content. There was all this alerts like Nazi salute, Nazi destruction and crime and stuff, and no one was talking about the content, the Jewish history and present, or the teenagers' work. So this was really, really hard. We tried to change this. This narrative in the end by a little interview in the newspaper, but who's reading the newspaper, but nevertheless it was really something. And maybe the last sentence, it was not easy to do this project with this institution. And then I left.
A lot of courage in that.
No, it was the courage was the teenagers who decided to be present in these dimensions and also with their names. I asked them, do you want to be in the credits with your full name, or do you want to be just with initials there? And half of them decided to be there just with initials because they were afraid maybe something will happen.
Justin. So, you talk about the power of music, and certainly in the Black community, if you're working with them, and how you use that music. Can you describe one of your projects, and how music is woven in? You started to mention that sort of in the healing process, if I can even call it that. And then talk about, I know you also work with some of the white community, so how is it different in terms of how you approach the whole truth-telling that you brought up?
Yep. Try and draw a couple of connections to some things that I've heard from my colleagues as well. So one of the things that we do at Center for Transforming Communities is we do creative placemaking, or sometimes we call it cultural placekeeping. The distinction between those two words is who owns what it is, right? So the practice of creative placemaking for a long time in the United States meant that it was outsiders coming from outside the neighborhood to create art within the community. Didn't mean that it wasn't excellent work, right? It didn't mean that it wasn't valuable and valued by the community. But it may mean that it may not, and I'll put a pin on this, it may not necessarily have been part of a power building praxis, which I think is the undercurrent, right, of a lot of the conversations that we're having. Cultural placekeeping suggests ownership of the place and autonomy. This is mine. We help to create this, right? And so how do we continue to create spaces? So I love the part where you gave like open space, right, in terms of for folks to be able to come in and then fill that with their meaning. And when I think about like Sister Victoria, like and how that connects to conversations today and really connects back to Memphis, my heart is warm because of the work of, I pulled out my phone earlier so I can remember Sister Katarina Oguntoya. Did I say it correctly? Okay. Because I think that and the work that she's doing is incredible. And it's really like a correlation to the work in Memphis. So paint a picture, Memphis, Tennessee, the civil rights movement, James Lawson, the father of the civil rights movement, recently met him through a project that I did with another colleague that's here at Union with Brother Greg. And he said to me something that was really profound and I actually hadn't heard before. Like, Memphis is the center of plantation capitalism. And And to give definition to that, plantation, right, is a reference to slavery, right, where slaves did the work. And capitalism, right, is the space that we're in now. And what that is a suggestion, right, that in many ways we are still in a form of slavery, right? Because folks, it's free labor. Folks aren't paid, right, to do the work that they're doing. So we call it plantation capitalism. I connect that dot to the broader movement work. So in Memphis, in the United States, the banning of books that you recently heard of, folks not getting paid enough money, and the impact of oppression. So let me define this real quick. I use Bell Hooks' definition of oppression. Oppression is where one lacks choices. Simply put, you don't have the choice. So that would suggest that liberation is about giving folks options and giving folks autonomy. So art, right, and music and culture and connecting those pieces in terms of some of the work that we do, it's open to interpretation. It gives autonomy to folks that often may not have felt that. So I want to proceed that before I even talk about some of the Memphis work so that you understand why the work we're doing is so important and connected to an analysis. I'll give you 3 movements, right? So James Lawson also said during that time that, we are in the now 2020 wing of the civil rights movement, right? That it's something that's been happening since the inception to this country. So if you go back to the 1914, 1920s, the Niagara Falls movement, where the NAACP was born, right? The National Advancement for Colored People, a National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, that was just about trying to get representation and integration and rights. Fast forward to the 1960s movement, right? Where it was about civil liberties, and this is a shout out to Sister Dina on this next point as well. Because the civil rights movement was really around the civic piece, which does not necessarily make the connection to what she was telling me earlier to human rights, right? That there's a distinction and there's a spectrum on that. That human rights are about our fundamental needs, like the right to water, right? The right to housing. I'm saying this because that's always been, that's the root cause, that's always been the wave of the wings of civil rights movement. We continue to etch at getting closer to what liberation may mean, but we're not there. And I believe we're not there because we're actually not doing a root cause analysis. To do a root cause analysis, we have to ask ourselves, why are we in the space that we are in? And when I look at oppression and why that happens, and when I compare that to Sister Victoria, or the story that Sister Katarina shared about a young man that when he got to a certain age, right, he was bigger, and that meant that he had to learn earlier what it meant to be Black, right, as it relates to the law, right, and that there was fear of our skin. This is all a part of dominant culture and helps to connect the dots to the root cause. Oppression, lack of choices, means that, somebody that's experiencing oppression, it doesn't matter if it's in the housing sector, it doesn't really matter if it's the economic sector, health sector, you don't have choices. It's all the same thing, which means that our solutions should probably be interconnected. So I'll take this back, put a pin there to music, and how music has multiple narratives happening, right? Multiple rhythms. All these things, right? Happening in one beat, multiple things. Not either or, not separate, both and, right? Mutual, all of these things happening in one beat, that our solutions have to be interconnected as well. Which is the value then of arts and culture, right? Helping to create the stage, helping to create the platform for folks that are oppressed. So draw one more beat, one more connection, and then I'll go into the specific program. That even when we create art, if that art is not connected to a duality, to a dual meaning, if it's not connected to power, if it's not connected to power building, then we may not have gotten to a root cause. Which is why within the African American aesthetic, when we have whole art forms that are being born out of a movement of freedom, power, not having access, that it always is connected. Every song that was created was connected to freedom. Every song was connected to power, even in the most mundane sense. Dock of the Bay. Looks like nothing's gonna change, and everything will remain the same. I done take 10,000 miles I run just to call this dock my own. Sitting by the morning sun, and I'll be sitting when the evening comes. That was a civil rights song. But we don't necessarily connect those dots. But in the community where we made meaning, so this is the piece I wanted to connect. We made meaning of it, what it meant as a black person, right? Not sense making. Sense making is the external, that's what you hear. Meaning making is the value that it meant to the people that were oppressed. That is where art becomes transformative. That is where we build power. So part of what we knew, right, in the space that books are being banned, and to your point, neutral. You talked about neutrality earlier, where for us to advance something, it has to be race neutral. In a city that's all black, it's chocolate. It's a chocolate city, and we can't say do race-centered policy work. To say, what I mean by that is where we can't state, oh, this is meant for this black community, these resources, where we can't say that. That is probably one of the highest forms of oppression that exists still in our face. So it meant that our approach had to be, in a very creative sense, about creative placemaking, cultural placekeeping, where there was two messages. But that second message was always connected to a space of how we build power. So, all of that, and then I'll wrap this part up real quick. Projects that we would do, it would look like a festival. It is a festival. The Binghamton International Festival, the South Memphis Soulsville Festival. They were festivals that brought together what you said earlier when you were saying, like, we're walking. And I'm like, yes, we need to put some more parades in our festivals, right? There was an underlying tone that the people created because they created that process, right? It was their idea to create the festival because it was an expression of resistance and it was an expression of their own voice and liberation. So it didn't just mean, like when folks came from outside, that it was like, hey, we're having a good time. They were selecting the things, autonomy, resources, to be able to make a choice. One of the most striking undercurrents, black folks across America, across the world, right? So we talk about Sister Katarina and coining Afro-Germans. We talk about Afro-Italians. We talk about Afro, all of that, right? There's a common denominator. And the denominator is blackness. And that fundamentally that there's a fear around that in society that we have yet to uncover because the root cause, which means because there was a fear that folks were divided, separated intentionally. That's why music became so important, because music meant we could congregate together without striking fear and could have the conversations in code. These were really important pieces, which means that the way that we could get to a transformative, to the root, right, and not strike fear, was that we had to have a dual way of doing that. So the festivals represent that. And what we teach at the Center for Transforming Communities are narratives around what it means to all of us can embody white supremacy, myself included, right? Because these are values. One would be being objective. Sister Dina said earlier that museums aren't objective, they're not neutral. There's a clear narrative that happens within them. And so we would say that's a glass ceiling to be objective. The things that are holding us back, that are invisible, that we can't see. The crystal stair are the things that we want to build. And that would be direct, open, constructive feedback. Another glass ceiling would be fear of open conflict. We don't want to have those types of, these are narratives that are tucked in. And so we're teaching the connectors to identify those on an individual basis that then informs the creation of what happens in terms of a festival, because it's connected to narratives and patterns of narratives that they've been able to see and analyze and assess. So that when you hear a song that's being created, that might be being premiered for the first time, it's actually informed by an entire process that strives to do an analysis around the things that folks don't have access to actually place power and undergird that so that they can have an authentic voice. And when you're listening to the song and seeing the smiles, it's because folks actually feel heard. And that's a part of like what I would just simply call Black joy. And that many of the images that we see in America are violent of Black folks. So just seeing Black smiling faces in itself is a form of resistance that we thought it was important to engage within our art and culture that we would create.
Thank you. I knew this would happen. We're just at the, we're at the precipice, to try to go deeper. We don't have a lot of time. I'm curious if any of the three of you, from what you've heard from each other, want to say something. What sort of sparked a new thought, a new idea, built on your work, or maybe not even on your work?
I can't wait to work with both of you. I hope we can afford it. I'm impressed and I already learned so much. Thank you for that. Sorry for this.
I have one, and it's from our conversation earlier. One of the things that I've been like wrestling with is, and it's connected to the power piece, but like, who do you all identify, right, as the grassroots voice, or the folks that are in the margins or pushed to the margins, right? I've been very excited about this because I got to hear earlier, right, like such a rich history around Jewish community and German community, and even understanding some of that in between. But one of the things that I'm still holding is like, in Germany, like, who are the folks that we can identify and say are being actively oppressed? I understand there's a spectrum, right? But what is the grassroots voice in Germany?
Well, something I've been thinking about as we were having this conversation that is essential to inhabiting any kind of minority experience, and I only know really that experience here in Germany, is that the Jews in this country were and remain a monolith. That is to say, we are seen as a single entity. And that makes the job of the government easier, that makes the job for society easier. Okay, this is this group, they function like this, they're, okay, we're making generalizations, but it's they have a single set of politics, they fall into line in this way, this is their economic status, and it's very dangerous, obviously, we all know that. That's a very problematic way to understand any group as a monolith. And politically, right now, that is fracturing the Jewish community here so devastatingly, because there are forces at work within the Jewish community that actually want to remain a monolith. Because if we're a monolith, we know our status, there is safety, there's a safety in that. In a place where we really have not had a lot of safety. There is a profound stability in saying, okay, we occupy this one spot, and everyone knows that that's where we are in the government, etc. And so much of my work working with LABA and other organizations I run for Jewish artists and Jewish thinkers has shown me that so many contemporary Jewish creative people here really don't fit into that monolith. I mean, and on all sides of the political spectrum. I'm not just talking left wing, but really they don't fit into the mold that Germany and German society and the German government wants Jews to fit into. And they make it problematic. They make the history in this country problematic by transgressing the boundaries of that monolith. And there's a lot of anger within the Jewish community at each other You know, you're saying things that, you know, people say to left-wing Jews, you know, why are you giving the words to anti-Semites? Why are you saying that part out loud? We shouldn't be saying that out loud, right? When it comes to Israel, when it comes to Palestinians, etc. We all know the elephant in the room, that's what we're talking about here politically right now. And it's been really challenging to think about, because we are all bonded. I mean, my philosophy, my mantra in working with so many young, and in my own practice here, but also with working with so many different types of Jewish creative people, is like, I just want the tent. There are not that many of us. Like, we gotta keep the tent big enough that we can all fit in. We're not trying to exclude. I don't want anyone to be excluded. We're ultimately all bonded by something, and I don't want, I mean, there are people on the fringes of everything that we don't necessarily need to have, but for the majority of us, like, I want everyone to stay in the tent. So it's a complex thing to think about. How do we stay true to ourselves, stay true to our politics, fight the fight we want to fight, but also and challenge that mold, but at the same time not lose our ties, not lose what is actually keeping us together as a community. And it's something that is playing out right now. I don't know. I don't have an answer, but it's a big thing right now here.
And Christoph, feel free to respond to this too. In America, I feel like what we are experiencing right now is actually a battle around equity over the past 10 years. Like, that's the term, right? For those who don't know, like, equality, right, is giving folks the same amount of things. Equity is giving folks what they need. Does that show up in the German context? That's for both.
For me, it's too hard. Losing my comfort zone of my Netflix English. That's a really good question. Maybe with a couple of beers later. But now I'm more the listener. Yeah.
So Rachel, do you want to sort of say the last word, and then we will have to close, but maybe while she's saying the last word, think about a closure.
Okay.
I don't know. We started talking about this earlier. I think for America, having lived in both places most of my life, half my life each place, Germany just doesn't have the wealth inequality gap the way America has it. There's poverty here, but that gap is so much smaller. There's so much more of a middle class here. There's so much more of a social safety net. We don't have the same weird, messed up school funding, zoning issues. It's just not the same thing here. So when we talk about equity, I mean, the German government gives me €200 per child every month. Just like that. I don't have to prove I have any economic status to go collect my €400 a month for my 2 kids. I actually don't even collect the money because I don't need it, and I think it's ethically wrong to collect it, but it's there waiting for me. So there isn't, you know, I shouldn't get the money. I have enough money. I don't need that money from the government. Other people should deserve my money, but Germans are very into making sure everyone has a kind of, the Nordic people, you know, Scandinavians are doing it really well right now, making sure everyone has a sort of same foundation to build off of, to grow from. And that is really, I think, why we have a much better functioning society than America. But
you know what? I just want to say, you know, all of these ideas that we're talking about, I hope you're linking them to memory work. Because, you know, power, equity, all of these issues, the past, storytelling, truth-telling, all of these are woven in a framework, I think, as we do sort of remembrance work. It is about the past, and it's also about messages about where we are today. So we sort of leave that provocative, maybe, conversation we're having for dinner where we can sit and really, you know, continue the conversation. And I turn it to you, Justin, as a surprise to sort of close out.
That was helpful, actually. And I think one of the things that, as somebody that's visiting Berlin for the second time, the universal health care is, You just don't know how much of a difference. It's the quality of life. So this is where I was talking to, well, I guess I won't mention her name, but I was talking to a sister earlier. I want to because she was really special how she responded. We were talking about poverty actually here. And what I realized in that conversation, my takeaway was mindset, right? Until you have exposure, right, to see what poverty looks like outside of the immediate space that you're in, what you always see is have and have-nots. So for instance, in Memphis, like with my students, they were part of the zip code we call 38106. For decades, folks said that that was the poorest zip code in the nation. But folks that lived there didn't know they were poor until people came in and told them that. My point is, like, we, in Memphis and across the United States, you'll see wealthy right next to poor, right? And I know here I think it's clustered different, but you still see some differences. However, the level of poverty, the violence of poverty is much different. And in the same token, like, as we were going around, and this is me meaning making now, right? And understanding, like, wow, it's just a beautiful and brilliant thing that you have explicitly named, right? Memory keeping, right? As a part of the culture in Germany, whereas it's been repressed in the United States. And that repression means that folks don't have access or exposure to even expand to understand how they can compare their own circumstances and make meaning. We can't get to transformative practices, my last thing, we can't get to transformative practices if people can't make meaning. You can't make meaning if you don't have access and exposure to things beyond your immediate environment. You can make sense of it academically. You can't make meaning of it and what it means. And so I believe that part of memory keeping, like if we are to do this and inject it into policy, is that we actually have to redefine wealth. Because when we remember, particularly in an African American or in an African aesthetic, where we came from, it completely defies how we think about wealth today. Because joy, village, tribal, community, connection work, all of that is a part of wealth. And when we remember that and tap into the memories, our North Star changes. And so in the space of capitalism, right, that dictates that there's a top and that there's a bottom, in this case, a very top and a very, very, very bottom, right, and it's violent at the bottom, we can't actually do anything transformative until we remember. So that's it. Memory keeping is so critical because it allows for us to access a different space, new pathways towards liberation.
Well, the three of you, thank you. Now we eat. Good conversation.